We investigated the 1800s population boom conspiracy, the Industrial Revolution. We're told it was an age of progress, a glorious new chapter written in steam and steel. But what if the workforce that powered this new world wasn't born, but built? There's a dark conspiracy theory that has been whispered for years. It tells of hidden facilities, of human factories designed to artificially create a population just to serve the machines. It sounds like something straight out of science fiction. But the population boom of the 1800s was so sudden, so explosive, that it's easy to see why people were searching for answers. The population of England, for example, had been pretty stable for the first half of the 18th century. Then, between 1750 and 1850, it nearly doubled. In just one decade, from 1811 to 1821, England's population shot up by 18%. So, we decided to investigate the myth of the human factory to find out what really happened. And the truth we found is stranger and more shocking than any conspiracy. Section 1. The problem. The myth of the instant population. The theory itself is chilling. It suggests that the insane leap in population during the late 18th and early 19th centuries wasn't natural. Instead, the idea is that a shadowy group, maybe the industrialists, maybe the government itself, set up secret facilities to, for lack of a better term, mass-produce people. And the goal? To create a massive, disposable workforce, perfectly timed to meet the endless demands of the new factories. It's a story that taps into a deep fear of dehumanization, of powerful forces manipulating life itself just for profit. Believers in this theory point to the staggering numbers. In 1750, England's population was around 5.75 million. By 1851, it had soared to over 16.7 million. How, they ask, could that possibly happen so fast? They spend their time combing through old maps and records, looking for anything out of place. Unexplained buildings in the middle of nowhere. Weird statistical blips in parish records that might hint at a hidden, artificial flood of people. They look at regions like Cornwall, where the population grew at a wild rate, all driven by the booming mining industry. Cornwall's population, for instance, nearly doubled between 1801 and 1861. Surely, they argue, explosions like that can't just be a coincidence. They have to be evidence of a plan. The image it conjures is powerful. Grim, windowless buildings hidden on fog-shrouded moors, churning out not textiles or steel, but people. It feels like a dystopian novel, but for some, it's the only thing that makes sense of the chaos of the era. The idea of an instant population becomes a powerful metaphor for the unnatural speed and brutality of the Industrial Revolution itself. It turns a messy historical process into a single, sinister plot, offering a simple answer to a very complicated question. And when you look at the world these people were living in, you start to understand how such a dark fantasy could take root. Section 2. The Agitation, a world turned upside down. So why would anyone even come up with a story like this? To get it, you have to understand the sheer trauma of the Industrial Revolution. This wasn't just an era of new machines. It was an era that completely shattered the old world. For thousands of years, life had been ruled by the sun and the seasons. Most people lived and worked on farms, their lives tied to the land. Then, almost overnight, that world was set on fire. The rise of factories acted like a giant magnet, ripping people away from the countryside. Between 1800 and 1850, the populations of cities like London and Manchester doubled. People poured into these new urban centers, hoping for work and a better life. What they found was often a nightmare. The cities grew so fast that there was nowhere for anyone to live. People were crammed into shoddy, slapped-together tenements. Overcrowding was the norm, with multiple families sharing a single, filthy room. Clean water was a luxury. Sanitation systems, if they existed at all, were totally overwhelmed. which led to diseases like cholera and typhoid spreading like wildfire. The very air became toxic, thick with coal smoke that blotted out the sun. Rivers turned into open sewers, choked with industrial waste. And at the heart of it all was the factory. The factory was a totally alien environment. It didn't run on the rhythm of the sun. It ran on the relentless, unforgiving rhythm of the machine. The work was mind-numbing, exhausting, and incredibly dangerous. Safety was a foreign concept. Workers, including huge numbers of children, worked brutally long hours for pennies. Children as young as 5 or 6 were used for their small size. They could crawl under active machinery to pick up loose threads, a job that often cost them a limb or their life. Men and women worked 12, 14, even 16-hour days in deafening, suffocating conditions. This was a world where human life felt cheap. The new industrial wealth created a class of bosses who often showed a shocking indifference to the suffering their businesses caused. The old social order was dissolving, replaced by a brutal new math of profit and loss. It was an age of massive dislocation, where the very meaning of being human seemed to be up for grabs. In that context, of explosive change, of unimaginable squalor and dehumanizing work, is the idea of human factories really that hard to believe? When people are treated like cogs in a machine, is it such a stretch to imagine they were made like them too? The myth wasn't just a fantasy. It was a dark reflection of a horrifying new reality. It was an attempt to find a villain, a deliberate cause for the seemingly random cruelty of a world turned upside down. Section 3. The solution. Unraveling the true causes. The human factory conspiracy is a great story because it's simple, but the truth, pieced together by decades of research, is way more complex and, in its own way, just as revolutionary. There wasn't one single cause for the population boom. It was a perfect storm of factors that completely changed the balance between life and death. The first, and maybe the most important piece of the puzzle, starts not in the factories, but in the fields. The 18th century saw an agricultural revolution in Britain. New farming techniques like crop rotation and the enclosure of common lands led to a massive increase in food. For the first time, food became more plentiful and reliable. Before this, a single failed harvest could mean famine. Better nutrition didn't just stop people from starving, it made them healthier. A well-fed population can fight off disease, and healthier women are more likely to survive childbirth and have healthier babies. This was the foundation of the population boom. It all started with a falling death rate. At the same time, we were taking our first clumsy steps in the war against disease. The 18th and 19th centuries saw the birth of public health. Things were slow, but they made a difference. Some cities started building cleaner water supplies and better sewer systems. But the most dramatic change was Edward Jenner's development of the smallpox vaccine in 1796. Smallpox had been one of history's greatest killers, and slowly bringing it under control saved countless lives, letting more children actually grow up. Even simple things like cotton clothing becoming more common because it was easier to wash than wool helped reduce lice and other carriers of disease. So better food and better health meant people were living longer. But that's only half of the equation. The other half is the birth rate. And this is where we see how money changed everything. In the old economy, getting married and starting a family usually meant you had to inherit land or a trade. Because of this, people, especially in England, tended to marry later in life. The new economy flipped that script. The growth of work, first in cottages and then in factories, meant young people could earn a wage without waiting for an inheritance. This new economic freedom allowed people to marry younger. Younger marriages mean a longer window for having kids, which naturally leads to more children per family. One estimate suggests that this rising birth rate, driven by earlier marriages, accounted for as much as 64% of the population growth. So, far from being artificially created, This new generation was a product of new opportunities that actually encouraged bigger families. This brings us to the records. The human factory theory needs there to be a hidden population that was never documented. But the historical evidence tells the opposite story. The first official census in Britain was taken in 1801, specifically because the government was worried about how to feed the booming population. The census, and the parish records of births, deaths, and marriages that it was based on, paint a clear, organic picture of growth. We can literally trace the rising number of baptisms and the falling number of burials. There are no mysterious gaps, no sudden injection of people into the records. We see growth that, while fast, is exactly what you'd expect from a falling death rate and a rising birth rate. And even in a place like Cornwall, the story checks out. The population boom there was absolutely tied to mining. But it wasn't because mine owners were breeding workers. The availability of paid work in the tin and copper mines just allowed people to marry early and support larger families, the same as the national trend. And later, when the Cornish mining industry collapsed, 250,000 people left Cornwall between 1841 and 1901. This mass exodus is a direct contradiction of the human factory idea. If this workforce was built for a specific purpose, why would they be allowed to just leave when the work dried up? The evidence doesn't point to a manufactured workforce, but to a real one that responded to economic booms and busts. Conclusion. The legacy of a myth, so no. The workforce of the Industrial Revolution was not bred in secret human factories. The population boom was the result of a complex dance between better farming, early medicine, and huge economic and social shifts. People were living longer, and they were starting families earlier. The result was a demographic explosion that changed the world. But the fact that the human factory myth even exists tells us something incredibly important. It's a ghost story born from the real trauma of industrialization. It shows how alien and brutal this new world felt. The speed of change was so dizzying, the conditions so awful, and the feeling of dehumanization so total that people reached for an explanation that matched the horror they were living through. To them, being treated like a disposable part of a machine made it seem plausible that they were manufactured like one. In a way, the fear behind the conspiracy is more telling than the conspiracy itself. It reveals a deep anxiety about losing our humanity to unchecked industrial capitalism, an anxiety that is still very much with us. We might not fear literal human factories anymore, but we worry about automation making workers obsolete. We talk about the gig economy, the insecurity of modern work, and the way technology can be used to monitor and control us. The story of the 1800s population boom isn't just a historical curiosity. It's a reminder that every massive societal shift, whether it's driven by steam or by silicon, creates immense pressure and fear. The human factory myth is a dark fable about what happens when progress outpaces our humanity. It's a false story, but it speaks a deeper truth about a fear that has haunted us since the first smokestacks blotted out the sun. If you enjoy digging into the hidden corners of history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation, and let us know in the comments. What other historical mysteries or conspiracies do you think we should tackle?